Good afternoon.
Life is pretty good, I guess.
Well, it certainly is after the Austrian result. It's great. It means that we've got some extra points on the board, and three tough away games having been played, one at home, and all to play for in 2017.
It's 3 years this month, 3 years in a week since you took over the job. Are you a different manager? Do you think about things differently with the 3 years experience under your belt?
No, I don't think I'm a different manager, but in terms of the approach, I think that's something that, for instance, club football, you play a game at the weekend, then you have the players again on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, regardless of the result. You have some sort of preparation to do, and you go again the following week. International football is totally different from that viewpoint. For instance, we played Austria last Saturday evening, and I won't see the players again, or I won't work with the players again until late March. Now that's a long time away. Obviously, they go back. Think about club football, park international football to the side. Great to have the points on the board. But no, from that viewpoint, it is very, very different. Always has been, and it's something I think you have to come to terms with.
Have you come to terms with it then? Because
I think that it gets you become more used to it in that sense. You mentioned here 3 years in a week. It has actually flown in. The first year was spent really trying to get to know the players a wee bit. We didn't have any competitive football for most of that year. We had a trip to America that turned out really well for us, not in terms of results, but just getting to know the players a wee bit better. And the one thing that I think the common theme that was running through the players was that for the most part they all wanted to play. And that's very, very important. They wanted to play, and they felt it was a privilege to play for their country.
Well, I think it's actually a fundamental thing of importance at the moment, because there's been a trend in world football where teams like Costa Rica reach the quarterfinals of the World Cup, and then Wales reach the semi-finals, Northern Ireland and Ireland, and like smaller teams, smaller nations now who aren't laden with superstars playing in the top leagues can actually go and compete. And I don't know if that was your expectation when you arrived, that actually if I just put a team together that believes in itself and works as a unit, a lot is possible here. I don't know if you knew that from the start, or was that your expectation?
Well, I mean, I at club level, I've been working with teams that were always trying to fight or punch above their weight, for that old cliched phrase, and so from that viewpoint, it wasn't new to me. But no, I think at tournament football. So in other words, when I say tournament football, I mean when you're actually at either the World Cup or the Euros. I think that things can happen for smaller teams because it's a short period of time, and you can grab a result once, and it gives you great confidence, and suddenly you can do things. Wales qualifying for the semi-finals of the competition. You mentioned Costa Rica in the World Cup 2 years earlier. Those type of things happen. Northern Ireland, I was part of a Northern Ireland side that got to the quarterfinals in 1982 by beating the host nation Spain. It was a marvellous result. So those things can happen. So I've experienced it. But actually getting to the tournament it's a long haul. It's a chore. It's hard work. It does not compare at all to the tournament when you're playing in great weather, generally speaking. So trying to get there, trying to get a side to believe in itself over a period of almost a year and a half of results, spaced out as well, to getting the team together. All of those things, I think, are very, very important in the makeup of the side.
Are you getting better at that? Like it seems like at the start, before.
No, I've always been good at it.
Just before you really knew who the players were, that whole first year. Like, for example, we had a team shorn of a number of players against Austria. 20 minutes in, one of your linchpin central midfielders goes off injured, and there's no beat missed. There's like okay, actually we're going to have to rearrange a bunch of things here.
Well, it seems that way, but of course you miss players. I've just made a point that, for instance, when you played the game, a fortnight later, no one remembers who plays in the game. It's the result. I've had this in the past as well too. we've gone into matches both in the qualification for the Euros and in the Euros with major players not playing in games. If I tell you now that you was something you wouldn't remember, that David Myler, who
Played right back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Played
Yeah.
right back for us against Germany in Gelsenkirchen. Against the Germans.
Played really well as well.
Absolutely right. He stepped into the game the other night against Austria as if he had never been away. And that was fantastic. And players stepping up to the plate. Does it mean that you do miss players? Of course. John Walters didn't. John Walters was really injured for the Euros.
Yeah.
A fit John Walters, considering what he had done for us in qualification, might have made a difference. Might have made a difference in that game against France.
We're obsessed with talking about how the team lines up, and during the Euros it was like, oh, Ireland have discovered the diamond, it's amazing, we're going to have these three players play really close to each other, and we're going to have James McCarthy at the base of the midfield, and then suddenly in the middle of the game against Austria that whole thing gets ripped up and you've got to go to a 4-2-3-1. We're obsessed with it. Are you guys obsessed with it? Do you think in those terms, or do you think, who are my available players, what is my opposition, what am I going to do?
Well, I think that's a very good point. First of all, when you talk about players being injured, yes, of course, when I get the reports coming through that players are not going to make the game, you curse your luck for 10 or 15 minutes, and then you get on with it. And that's been the nature. There's nothing you can do about it then after that, other than change the system around. Now, it is not a case of having a certain system and you're going to have players playing to that system. It's not at all. It's about the players, first of all. And it's about the players you have available to you and where you think that they're best placed to get a result for the team, while they can still actually make a contribution in a position that they are mostly used to, but might find a little bit strange.
So how many of those do you work on, and how many of those do you have, and do you think of it in those terms?
No, I do. It's not in terms. You don't have enough time to work on those particular things, because remember, again, getting back to this point, yeah, I think that people feel as if at international football that you have got weeks and weeks to prepare and that you're sitting doing that. Not at all. You're on edge most of the time, certainly in the lead up to games. But then when you have the players in for games, then you have to take into consideration they played over the weekend. They stayed, and then they have some rest. They have to recover from injury. By the time you're getting the players out on the field together to work on a few things, which you have to try and do, then your time is really limited. For instance, we came back, not this Austria game, we met up on a Monday night before the Austria game on Saturday, and by comparison to the previous time, that was a lifetime, so that was great. But the matches before, we came in on a Sunday, and we were playing Georgia on a Thursday, and then Moldova on a Sunday, I think it was. So the preparation time was limited. What you have to try and do in that there is get players' heads right.
Do you get frustrated by the fact...
Heads right, I should say.
Do you get frustrated by the fact
Not a double plural.
that sometimes people talk about the performances when the results are good? Like, we were having a chat about this earlier on. In the Premier League, the players play 60 games, the fans watch 60 games, and there's a bad game, there's a bad game, then there's a good game, there's another good game, and what they remember are the good games. Whereas at an international level, you play so few games. The performance against Georgia wasn't great, but we got the results. And there's a natural sense where you're like, well, everybody shut up with the performance, we got the results. And then we play really well against Austria, and now you've got 5 months of everybody gone, this is the best Ireland team we've had in ages.
No, well, I don't agree with any of those particular things. Yes, of course, the results are the be-all and end-all of everything. You have to try and win football matches. The whole idea of qualification is to enjoy with the players and supporters. And I mean this, and I'm not trying to be patronising about this here. The supporters in France in our tournament were absolutely phenomenal. But then I expected that because I had seen it in Jack Charlton's day, and just to share part of that there in France was great for me individually. But I think everything goes together. I think you have to get the results. You have to grind out results to get to try and get to major tournaments. It's not as if to say we're qualifying every single time. So you have to grind out. The players are totally aware of that. A night in Austria will be totally different to for instance, to a match against France and Lyon. Totally different. Atmosphere, everything is different. We've played a lot of games away from home. We've had to show endurance, capability, and really great desire to stay unbeaten in matches and then try and grab a win. And that's exactly what the players have done. and to try and make it through. It's a long process. So from all of those things you're talking about, people get carried away with things. For instance, let's go back. You just mentioned there the Premier League, and I'll give you two instances. Pep Guardiola comes over, takes over at Manchester City, makes a few changes that people think maybe leaves a goalkeeper away. They won first 5 or 6 matches, and suddenly then they're going to win the league by a landslide. I even heard some journalists speaking on a Sunday, but they do a Sunday programme gathered round and talking about that Manchester City might go through the league unbeaten. I mean, I had a hearty laugh to myself. Then suddenly they lose a few games, and now it's not as rosy as you think. Now they're fighting back again. It's only 7 weeks ago since Conte had to defend himself by possibly losing his job at Chelsea. What have they gone and done? They've gone on a run. I think people are, more so than ever before. Maybe it's social media, maybe it's just media, maybe it's just all of those things. People jump to conclusions very, very quickly. I've had to live with this here as well too. In the same time, we drew against Scotland. We were not out of the competition. It was doom and gloom around about the place. I know these, and we've fought and we've gone through.
Are Scotland a bit of a cautionary tale in terms of how high they were riding in the last group, and now suddenly Ireland fans are thinking we might go to Russia?
Well, I don't have to remind myself of this year. I'm a long time in the game. I think I know the game reasonably well. In fact, I know it brilliantly. But at the end of the day, I will say this to you. It's not a cautionary for me. If people want to get carried away with certain things, fine, that's up to them. But I think that you're underestimating the fan that comes here to these games. I think that they can make up their own minds about the strength of the team, some about the weaknesses that we've tried to conceal, like everything else. And I think that they come to support because they see fantastic enthusiasm about the side and a great will to put everything into the game. And if we can come up with a result, it's great. Not that they wouldn't be disappointed if we didn't do, but I think they see those things. And I don't think they have to go and read a newspaper to make up their minds about what the team's about here. We're short in certain things. We know that, but we're trying to make up for it in different ways. And at the spin, it's fine. We could lose the next 3 or 4 matches, But one thing I will guarantee you, it won't be through lack of effort.
Can I ask you one last thing then? Just the whole Ronald Koeman issue. What actually happens?
No, Ronald Koeman, I think it's very, very simple. James McCarthy came to play for us in games. He wanted to play. He was recovering from an injury. He hadn't played for Everton. Of course, that in the lead up to our matches, and but the injury that he had healed. He was fine, and he wanted to play. I wouldn't put James McCarthy or any other player into a situation where they didn't feel as if they could play. Hence him not playing this time with a hamstring. But that was a hamstring injury. That was totally different to the injury that he had sustained at Everton. So he comes to us. He wants to play in the games. I knew that he was going to get tired in the matches, maybe both, certainly one of the games. But he left us, having participated in the 2 games. And he goes back to Everton, and he's fit. In fact, if anything, it might have helped him. Then the next thing I hear that the manager's saying that we have killed him, which is slight against our medical staff and all of us, and that we had killed him. So Lazarus returns immediately. On the very day he's talking about it, James McCarthy had actually trained for Everton and was available 2 days later.
And makes the bench,
And makes the bench and comes on to play. So it makes the words that you're talking about rather hollow. If James had missed out the next 3 or 4 weeks because Everton were trying to take care of him, I could possibly have understood the argument a
Is
little
this
bit
just
more.
silly beggars for managers? And in a way, do you appreciate that that's just what club managers do?
I've been a club manager myself for most of my life.
Yeah.
Most of my managerial time has been spent in club management. And I've always said this, and I've never veered off this. Do you know the biggest pains were the friendly matches? You'd really, at a time when you thought, how can you possibly have a friendly game coming up? For instance, in a week of the opening week of the season, there might have been a friendly game, and that I used to feel was quite nonsensical. You're preparing for games. I have never ever tried to tell a player not to play for their country at competitive level. Absolutely not.
So no sympathy for Koeman. Like, you understand the situation, but it's like
But he's done all of these things. Of course, he understands those situations, and this is the point. No one likes, as a club manager, no one likes to come back and find their player being injured at international level. But it is part of the job. I had this as well too as a manager. Players going away on international duty at Aston Villa, at Celtic, and coming back and not being available to me. Of course you curse your luck. Of course you do all of those particular things. But that's part of the game. Players, international football.
And very last question, is it a coincidence that all the Derry lads are playing so well all of a sudden?
And there will be a lot more. There will be a lot more simply because I'm from Derry and I will be including them all the time.
What is going on?
Because they
Why
are
is it suddenly a hotbed
players.
of football?
Derry has always been a hotbed of football. When I was a boarder there in the 60s at St Columns in Derry, the day boys, there's at least 6 or 7 day boys who could have made the grade in England without a problem. Talented players, naturally talented players, has always been the case with Derry City lads.
Martin, enjoy the break. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ger.